Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you in or near the woods? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
I regularly camp in a national forest in West Virginia. A number of years ago, me and a few friends decided to go exploring off of the marked trail. About 50 yards off the trail, we found a surprisingly well-built shelter. Large branches lashed together to make a rectangular frame covered in heavy plastic. It had a makeshift bed, an actual wood-burning stove, a bunch of candles, and some clothing inside. While we were checking it out, we were all suddenly struck with a "we need to get the hell out of here" feeling, along with a strong sense we were being watched. We booked back to our camp site and finished out the trip. On the way home, once we were back in an area where we could pick up radio, we heard that a man, wanted for several brutal murders, had managed to escape police custody. He was thought to be hiding in that same national forest where we camped and found the structure. This all happened about a week before we found the thing. About 6 weeks after that, he was found dead in a river in a nearby town after a bad flash flood. I live in or near a forest, and we had one of my mom's friends staying with us. I don't remember all the details, but here we go. In the room that me and my brother were staying in, there was a bunk bed, and I slept on the top. Well, one night out of the blue, I hear a knocking sound. My room is on the complete other side to where the door is, so it's weird that I could hear knocking, and it was loud too. When I tried to investigate, I open my eyes and see a man shining a flashlight in my window next to my bed. I thought to myself that some guy was trying to break into my house, but I could see that there was a cop car parked not too far away, and so I got up to tell my mom. I told her there was a cop, and she got me. When she talked to the cop, apparently the friend that my mom had been staying with had done something, but she didn't go to jail for it. Norway. I was cross-country skiing in a remote course in the woods pretty late, like 11 o'clock or so. The tracks are lit up so that you can see where you're going, and it also lights up part of the forest it goes through. As I finish a downhill and start on a flat section, I see a man just standing in the woods about 10 meters outside of the tracks. He stood just far enough into them so that his face was cloaked in darkness, but you could still see him standing there. I slow down a bit because I lose the momentum from the downhill. I look at him, and he just lifts his right arm, seemingly reaching for me even though I was 5 to 10 meters away from him. I was scared shitless and was out of there, going as fast as I can until I reached home. The scariest part was that this was in a really remote place. He would have had to walk 5 kilometers in deep snow to reach the spot where he stood, and he would have had to walk 5 kilometers again in either direction to reach civilization again. So me and my cousins were walking around the woods close to their house. Oldest cousin, we'll call him Chad, knows the woods pretty well. So we're walking around and we see something new, this stone wall. Not even Chad had seen this. We're looking around and my younger cousin Brad takes out his flashlight and accidentally drops it in this well. So we all watch it fall down, and where it hits the ground, all we see is a dead, full-grown, decomposing deer in that well. We scream and run. As kids, it's creepy, but how did that big-ass deer get in there? Jumped. It isn't exactly horrifying, but it freaked me and my friends out at the time. We were like 10 years old. So basically, I live in a subdivision that is kind of surrounded by forest, and I would always go into the forest to explore, whatever. This time, my sister and 2 other friends all went into the forest together, and we got to a part that has like a wall of tall bushes and grass and plants on one side. Essentially, nothing was visible on our right side. We were walking and talking, and all of a sudden we hear a rustle on our right. We don't think anything of it, assuming it's a squirrel or something. Well, a few seconds later, the rustling gets louder. Again, not much of a concern, but this time the bushes that were around 2 to 3 times our size start all moving a lot. This is clearly not a squirrel, as they couldn't move the bushes that much. Here's where I'm sure some kind of kid imagination kicks in, but me and my sister both remember hearing an odd noise, followed by whatever this thing was bolting down the length of the bush. We still swear we could see the top of this behemoth of an animal as it ran by us. Everyone loses their cool and books it back to where the house because some 7-foot-tall animal just ran by us. We made it back to the house safely, but it can still freak me out sometimes, assuming it was real. I don't know what it was. It may have been some moose or something, which is kinda scary, considering that moose have been known to be aggressive. Almost hit by a train. Near where I grew up was a pretty large wooded area that I loved to explore in. Rocks to climb, creek to swim in, and some train tracks. If you follow them long enough, it takes you to a train bridge that stretches over the major interstate that runs through my city. To cross it while walking takes about 2 to 3 minutes because of how long it is, and also is at least 100 feet above the interstate, so nowhere to go besides forward or back while on it. A third of the way across, the one time I heard a train approaching that I couldn't see, so I just had to guess and run in the opposite direction. Thankfully I chose correctly, managed to run back to the woods before it was too close, but if I had guessed wrong, I'd have to jump off the bridge or get splattered by the train. I was with my uncle on his ranch in the semi-desert of South Africa. I know this isn't the woods, but close enough. And one night at dinner he says, "Hey, want to hunt with me later tonight?" I accept because I'm a teenager, and I want to fire a gun because that seems cool. Anyway, a few hours after dinner, just as the sun was setting, we head out to his truck. We get a good bit away from the house, and then he stops the truck and turns it off. At this point, it's completely dark. I put my hand on the door handle to get out, but he stops and puts a finger to his lips. Then he climbs into the back seat of the truck and reaches into the trunk area. I hear something turning and a sound that sounds like a sci-fi device being turned on. I later learned that it was an infrared flashlight or something like that. Anyway, as he turns up the power on this device, I start to see little green dots spring up around the truck. The power continues to go up, and the dots get brighter and more numerous. I eventually realize that they are eyes that belong to hungry jackals. Even my uncle was surprised at how many were there. We were going to shoot them. They had been taking his sheep, but he decided to call off our hunt because he couldn't guarantee our safety with that many out there. When we got back, I realized that my clothes were so wet with sweat that I had to completely change out of them and take a shower before I could go to bed, lest I destroy my sheets. I didn't go hunting with him again for many years. I was bow fishing with my dad a couple years ago on some private land that we got permission to go on. We were wading in the water using flashlights to shine into the water in order to see the fish. All of a sudden, we hear something yell at us. "The f you doing on my property?" Apparently it was his land. My dad responded, "We got permission to fish here from a friend." "Get the f out," he yelled back. We left for home after that. Seriously thought I was going to get shot by some redneck. Friends and I were out on an abandoned apartment complex with some nearby houses that were under construction, which were also abandoned due to flooding from Hurricane Harvey. Nature took over fairly quickly, so I guess you could say it was in or near the woods. So on one side of an abandoned apartment complex was graffiti of a pink silhouette of a deranged girl with hair sticking out and a deranged smile with her knockers hanging about. That was the first scary thing. Next, we were leaving and a truck passed us while we were in the car and turned around to start following us. We got out of there so quickly that we broke multiple traffic laws. Possibly be arrested for, but still, scare shit, man. While me and some buddies came home from the military for a couple of weeks, we decided to go up to the mountains in Oregon. When I was a teenager, me and my uncle and cousins would hunt buck and foxes around the area we wanted to camp at. My friend just asked one day, and we're like, sure. We went up to Weimar to set up, trying to go near the creek, but away from the hunting areas, although it wasn't hunting season. Skip to after the tent's set. We're pulling out some camping chairs and making a fire, having a few drinks and cooking food. We all get tired after listening to one of my friends play guitar and sing, and we head to the tent. It was 4 of us in a 5-person tent. I'm sleeping. It's like 1 something in the morning, and my buddy is shaking me saying, Dude, wake up, right now. And I'm like, what do you want? He stares me dead in the eyes and mutters, bear. I didn't know if I should believe him at first, but when I peeked my head out to check, he was right. There was a huge mama bear with 2 cubs trotting behind her, sniffing the floor looking for food, while her kids knock over our barbecue. My other friends were already awake, but are being tattered. Me and the friend who shook me awake were drunk, but not falling on our asses drunk. One of the drunk ones brought his double-barreled shotgun, and I was trying to ask him where it was, and he was just like, oh, what do you mean? I wasn't going to get a fine for shooting one, not during season. 2, my license expired while I was recruited, and I had made plans to renew it 3 days before we headed back to the base. 3, the bear had cubs. I just thought, forget the gun. I guess the best thing to do was to either run or just stay quiet and wait till they left. We decided to do the second option for a little while. Maybe 12 minutes later, still haven't left. We're starting to get antsy. One of my buds just went back to sleep like an idiot. Long story short, we got tired of waiting and just booked it. Thank God she didn't chase us. We ran to the campsite's ranger lodge and told a few rangers what happened. They ended up scouting the area and found her and drove them off somehow. This happened a few years ago at my parents' house in a small town in Wayne County. Anyone that knows the area knows some parts are very rural. Well, my parents live right in town, not as far from the center of it, but in a weird spot. The town only has maybe 500 people in it, town limits, and it's surrounded by farmland and forests. They live right near the railroad tracks and canal, and their backyard is pitch black at night because the streetlights don't reach back there. The yard backs up to a walking trail in woods. It's actually pretty creepy back there after dark, even though it's a 2-block from downtown. The night the story takes place, it was extremely dark. I think it was a new moon or a moonless night, and it was overcast to boot. Late summer or early fall, so it was pretty dry. No mud to capture any footprints. My parents, brother, and I were talking in the living room at the front of the house, the part of the house facing town and light. The house is kind of long and skinny, maybe 30 or 40 feet wide, but probably 120 to 150 plus feet long. As we were talking, the family dog stood up, looked around, and started to growl really low. He was a yellow lab, about 90 pounds, half deaf and blind from diabetes. Overall, he was a really chill dog. He'd never bark at other dogs, and very rarely bark at people. That's what made this so odd. His hackles went up, and he started barking toward the back of the house. There are at least 2 closed doors before you even get to the room where the back door is. The dog is now like full-on berserk, barking at the closed door in the hallway. We opened it and followed him to see why he was going nuts. We get to the door to the back room and are now worried someone had broken in. But when we opened it, Morley shot straight to the back door, jumping and barking and snarling, making sounds I've never heard this big baby of a dog make. I opened the back door, and he tried to bolt out. He was going to attack whoever or whatever was out there. Me and my parents step out on the back porch and close Morley inside. He still sounds almost rabid. We wait a second for our eyes to adjust because the backyard is pitch black. We see a silhouette, maybe 40 or 50 feet away, standing at the edge of the yard, right near the railroad tracks across the road. Now, to say this thing was big is an understatement. It was way over 6 feet tall, probably closer to 7.5, 8, and extremely broad. I'd think it was a potential burglar that we caught sneaking up to the house if it wasn't so massive. My parents to this day swear it was a black bear. Officially, according to the DEC, black bears don't live anywhere near this area and haven't for a long time. Also, the size of it would have been a record-sized bear. Also, the reaction of my dog going nuts doesn't seem like what a bear would do. After we had had Marley inside, it just stood there, upright for about 2 minutes, before we decided it was best to go inside, as the hairs on the back of our necks were standing up. The reason it freaked me out was even at the distance it was at, you could hear it breathe, deep, raspy breaths. It sounded like it was breathing right next to my ear. They were slow and steady, not like someone who was out of breath. It wasn't like they were trying to make their breath sound loud. It just was. I immediately went to find a flashlight, but when I got back outside, whatever it was gone. No tracks, no fur, just a huge silhouette that was too big to be a person, but acted unlike any wild animal I've ever encountered. I lived in this neighborhood a few years back, and in the neighborhood was a park surrounded by woods. I didn't know how long it was or how big the woods were. All I knew is that they were just there. So, me being me, I explored the woods and found a burned up tire and a leather seat looking like it was burned a long time ago, and just random parts of burned cars in the woods while there was nothing else. I remember looking up what used to be there, and it was like a casino that caught fire and burned up really badly, but I could never find the source or site again. Anytime I tried to find it, and almost every time I was there, I could have sworn I heard water rushing, like a river or waterfall. I could never find it though, any source of water. I was just being weird. I was camping with 2 friends, and we got 250 UG of acid each, which made this whole situation so much scarier. Anyway, we planned to look up at the stars and talk about life as we were tripping, but that quickly got old, and one of my friends had the bright idea to walk to a river nearby, and on the walk to the river, we kept hearing rustling in the bushes, which is normal for the woods, but since we were on acid, we thought we were being followed by something. So we all got back to back with our knives out. Yes, I know, 3 R's on acid, without a trip sitter, with knives as a recipe for disaster, and slowly walked back to our camp in that position. When we got back to our camp and sat down at the fire, I saw eyes looking at us from all around, so I told my friends about it, and we spent the rest of the night in a tent together with knives, tripping balls, and jumping at every single noise we heard.
I mean, yeah, it really does sound like a terrible idea. Under a hallucinogenic drug with sharp weapons and in an unfamiliar area. I'm glad you guys made it out. Not the best tripping behavior, but glad you're okay.
This is a story from my mom, and it always gives me the willies. She's from New Jersey, and she used to go camping with my grandparents a lot of the weekends in the Pine Barrens. If you don't know anything about American, or specifically New Jersey, lore, the Pines are notorious for creepy stuff, including the Jersey Devil. Nobody in my family ever encountered anything weird, though, until this night when she was 13. The trip went normally, but as they were packing that night to go home, my mom started feeling creeped out, like something was wrong. Nothing out of the ordinary happened until they turned out of the campground onto the highway. The road was a long highway, surrounded by thick woods on either side for miles and miles. The car's power flickered, and then the radio station turned to white noise, and something huge flew so close to the roof of the car that it completely blocked out the light from the moon. The wingspan was so wide that it covered the width of the road, and the flaps were so powerful that even with the windows up, it was distinctly audible, and the wind from the shock, it shook the car. They debated for a while over what it was, but my mom still thinks it was the Jersey Devil. Whatever it was, had a wingspan much larger than any bird native to the US or even still alive anywhere in the world, maybe. And it flew so fast that as soon as it had happened, there was absolutely no sign of anything in the sky, not even the sound of its wings, which were extremely loud. My mom's not one for tall tales. This is, honestly, the only controversial story she's ever told that I can recall, so it's pretty realistic to me, at least. Me and my two friends were camping in a small forest, let's say 20 kilometers squared. After making dinner, we all get to our tent, but leave the campfire on. In the middle of the night, one of my friends is quietly tapping my arm with his hand over my mouth. He later said it was to stop me from making any sound. I woke up to him with his finger over his lips, actioning to me to not make any sound. He points to the wall of the tent. At first I see the campfire, barely alive, but then I notice what he's so worried about. A thin, human-shaped figure. We don't risk waking up my other friend, but I get my phone out and text my parents, who are staying in their little log cabin about 10 minutes walk away. The text I sent was somewhere along the lines of, "Dad, I can see a human-shaped figure against the tent wall. Please come here." About 20 minutes later, we hear a loud gunshot, Dad's hunting rifle, and the mysterious figure drops to the ground. He runs over to the tent and checks that we're all right. We all respond. The other friend in shock, waking up to the gunshot. We all get out of the tent and see a man lying on the ground, clenching his arm. This was not illegal, as my dad had noticed he had been reported earlier in the week as on the run after murdering 2 women. He was carrying an AR-15, which is a very dangerous gun. We called the police and they arrived within 20 minutes. This was by far the most scary thing that has happened to me ever. Walking along after dark, on my way home, nobody around that I could see, no buildings close by because I hadn't reached that part of town yet. Just me at night, alone on the path. Paddocks on one side, nothing but trees on the other. Probably not the smartest place for a young woman to be walking alone, but I needed to get home. This all happened within the space of only a few minutes, but it felt like so much longer. I heard a rustling from the trees beside me and started freaking out. I've seen enough horror movies to know a rustling from the trees at night is never a good thing. I started walking faster. The rustling got louder and closer, so I started to run, completely terrified. I was imagining axe murderers, thieves, carnivorous wild animals, even supernatural beings at that point. I had no idea what was there, but I didn't want to wait around and find out, so I ran. The thing was moving fast in my direction, still in the trees, so I couldn't see it, but it sounded big. I was convinced it was after me. I heard the rustling sound, crunching of leaves and twigs, something making thumping noises, getting quickly louder as the thing got closer. I heard it pass me, still hidden among the trees, and then suddenly it crashed through the branches and out into the open. A dark figure, taller than I was, and moving fast. I froze in terror, sure that this was the end. Sure I was going to be murdered. And then my panic subsided, and I actually got my first proper look at the thing. It was a freaking kangaroo. A big, muscular kangaroo. It wasn't chasing me. It just happened to have been traveling in the same direction as I was. It just hopped off down the path and was out of sight before I'd even fully registered what was happening. So it turns out, I was running scared from something that didn't even care I was there. But it did give me quite a fright. Walked home quickly after that. I was running in the woods training for my upcoming cross-country season, and I stopped to allow a mountain biker to pass on the narrow trail. He stopped, and, "Oh, you scared me. I thought you were an animal or something. You're all by yourself. You want something to eat or some water?" As if he was asking a dog if he wanted a treat. So huge red flags immediately shot up. Humans are the most dangerous animal you can encounter in the woods. So the standard code of behavior is to simply acknowledge each other with a just hi or good morning, and pass, keeping the farthest possible distance. Straying from that, especially when one party is alone, can feel very alarming. Then he started dismounting the bike, and I used the second, when he was off balance stepping over the bike that was between us, to sprint past him, and I didn't stop until I reached my car. He didn't try to stop me, and I wasn't pursued, but I'm glad I didn't stick around and find out if he meant harm or not. I generally feel very safe in the forest, though. I wander around in the woods solo daily since I was a kid. It's simply where I live, and I've never had an incident except for that one. I definitely can't say the same for wandering in the city. I've never shared this story with anybody, and coincidence would have it that my dad's funeral was yesterday, and it had me thinking of things that we did. And it just so happened to see this post just now, so here we go. This happened in 2001 when I was 12 to 13. My parents split up in 95, and my dad had every other weekend with me. He didn't have heaps of money, so he always had to improvise on the things that we would do on our weekends. One night, I want to say in January or February, we were bored at home, and he suggests that we drive up to Mount Baldy, Southern California ski park. Ski lifts, as it had been snowing pretty good up there, and it would just be nonsensical fun, I suppose. I remember it being cloudy, lightly snowing, not hard enough to stick to the roads though, and it must have been about 2 a.m, as we had gone after Saturday Night Live. Watching it was our thing, had ended. If you've never been to the base of Mount Baldy lifts, I should explain to you that it's a single 2-lane road that goes up about 10 to 15 miles and then makes a sudden hairpin turn that leads directly to the parking lot for the lift. At the parking lot, you're surrounded on 3 sides of steep mountain face, with the 2 east or west sides particularly steep, as the one behind you to the north. If you were facing the road and the lifts that go up to the park. Anyway, we drive up not encountering any other cars, and we get to the parking lot, get out to pee, and just kind of hang out for about 10 minutes or so. I remember walking maybe 20 steps with him away from the car, when out of nowhere, coming from the east, steep mountain face, we hear this almost scream-like growl noise. I've never heard anything like it before, nor since. Imagine if you could hear a bear's growl mixed with a man's scream. It lasted about 10 seconds, and was loud enough to echo through the mountains. There weren't any houses close enough, nor cars around for it to be a person. Nor could anybody go up the mountain face without climbing gear. My dad and I both froze, stared at each other, and hauled ass back down the mountains. I've been up there many times since, all times of day and night, and still have never heard or experienced anything quite like that. I've heard grizzly bears, black bears, bobcats, etc., and nothing even comes close. He and I actually talked about it a couple of days before he passed, and we were both still stunned to this day as to what it was that made that noise.